Okay, you may have noticed that this is no longer called the HD Rants. That's because I'm not talking about HD specifically from this point forward. I'll probably talk about it at, in intervals, but I mentioned a while back in some of the other, a few days ago in one of the other HD Rants that I would be broadening the spectrum of these rants and not just do rants but also do reviews and sort of, looks back at different things, retro stuff, whatever springs to mind. So anyway, this is kind of the first of that. It's basically going to be nothing fancy. I'm just talking. Some of you may say I'm talking out of my ass. Whatever. I don't care. Anyway, so, sorry. Showing the belly. So I just wanted to kind of come on and say, hey, how's it going? But I actually wanted to talk about Laserdisc, which was, for a long time, a lot longer than a lot of people seem to realize, Laserdisc was basically the elite, high-quality home video format for a very long time. This is before DVD came out. And at the time, you basically had VHS, getting all the press and getting all the big bucks. And you had Beta. There were some video releases on Beta and stuff. I'm talking about the home video revolution, as it were. So you had VHS, you had Beta, but then you also had Laserdisc. And for a short time you had Video Disc, which was another format. Video Disc was different. Video Disc, you would insert like a big... these things were the size of records, okay? They were like 12-inch platters. Okay, both Laserdisc and Video Disc. Video Disc, you would slide in as a cartridge. The player would load the disc out of the cartridge and then spit the empty cartridge back out. But it was actually an analog system. It worked on the same principle as tape. There was a head that would read the disc, much like a tape or a floppy disk, and but it was still an analog signal. It looked better. I don't know off the top of my head what the resolution was for Video Disc. I know it was better than VHS, but not as good as Laserdisc. Okay. So anyway, Video Disc didn't really catch on. It was kind of a cumbersome format. I knew a guy who had a bunch of them. He bought like a box of, I don't know, 40 titles or something that he got for $10 because they were clearing them out, and he showed them to me a while back. He was a dentist, so he had a lot of disposable income. But anyway, fast forwarding a few years, in 1991 I got my first Laserdisc player, and then as such did a lot of reading up about the format and so forth, and basically I was a video freak, and I just wanted the best quality format I could find for my movies and TV shows. Of course, at the time there wasn't really a lot of TV shows on Laserdisc. There was some stuff, but usually it was just, a few random episodes of a show or a few random episodes of a cartoon or whatever. So, we didn't really have season sets. Now in Japan, Laserdisc was huge. Laserdisc, I think, was actually bigger than VHS in Japan. But, I mean, it's Japan. They love new technology and gadgets and toys and stuff. So, yeah. So in Japan, they actually did have a lot of season sets of shows and stuff. I remember they put out season sets of, I think it was the X-Files. And it would be like $200 for a half season. For a half season, okay? So like 12 episodes for $200, and but that's $200 for us to get it as an import. I'm sure it didn't cost as much for folks over in Japan, but yeah, I would subscribe to some of the Laserdisc catalogs and so forth. But the reason I wanted to mention Laserdisc is because I hear it mentioned from time to time in home video discussions and whatnot, and it's always mentioned sort of with tongue firmly in cheek. It's like, oh yeah, you remember Laserdisc? Like, and yeah, the format wasn't without its problems, but it was around for a long, long time. Laserdisc was around for almost 20 years. A lot of people don't know this, but it originally debuted around the same time that VHS was coming out. I mean, VHS debuted in the late 70s. Laserdisc debuted, if I remember correctly, also in the late 70s. Now, originally, the master tapes that they would use were pretty much the same ones they were using for VHS tapes. So it was just the VHS version put on Laserdisc, but from the same original, like, broadcast quality master tapes. So even though they're from the same source, the Laserdisc version would always look better simply because it had higher resolution. if you want to talk numbers, I mentioned that I generally don't like to talk analog numbers because they're measured differently than digital for resolution. But basically, analog is measured pretty simply. You have a certain number of scan lines that make up your picture, right? And then they're interlaced, okay? So basically the way it would work is usually your TV will scan all the even lines first, and then it'll scan all the odd lines. And it does this 60 times a second, or 60 frames per second. So 2 fields of scan lines, even, odd, for 30 frames per second. So 2 fields per frame. So 60 fields or 30 frames. Does that make sense? Okay? Anyway, like I said, there's no point in getting into it because it's pretty much technology that's on the way out the door anyway. But for the sake of this discussion, VHS had 240 lines of resolution, okay? Which isn't a lot. That's like half of what DVD has. And I don't know how much it actually had this way, if you were to measure it this way. Like how many pixels across, or if it's even... don't even worry about it. This is the main thing, the horizontal resolution, okay? So you had your 240 lines of resolution. Laserdisc had 425. So it was actually pretty darn close to what we have now on DVD, like just standard definition DVD. But this was around for a long time. And the reason I feel that Laserdisc deserves a bit more respect in the history books is because a lot of the stuff that we enjoy now and pretty much take for granted on DVD started on Laserdisc. For example, number 1, widescreen being pretty much the standard. Widescreen was pretty much the standard on Laserdisc since the early 90s. Yeah, since the early 90s. How many of you saw a widescreen home video on any format before the early 90s? Or before you saw it on DVD, for that matter? Probably not very many of you. But, yeah. Laserdisc. The first one ever, you want to know what the very first widescreen video ever was? Was Manhattan by Woody Allen. Bet you didn't know that. And here's something interesting. We're all used to seeing the black bars, like you're probably seeing here. Unless, of course, you're watching this on a high-definition television years and years and years from now. Yeah, well, we're used to seeing the black bars, right? Manhattan had sort of off-blue bars. And in fact, this was so radical and so new and so strange to people that people were taking their videos back to the store thinking they were broken, that there was something wrong with them. But it was actually Woody Allen's idea to do it. Now, whether he pioneered letterbox on home video or not, originally, I don't know, but he was the first one to actually do it. And that was pretty interesting. I imagine one of those videos probably goes for a pretty penny now in terms of being a collector's item. I wouldn't mind getting my hands on one just to have the first widescreen video. You know, interesting side note, the first widescreen video I ever saw, I actually saw in 1982, I believe. I think it was 1982. And you know what it was? It was a bootleg video of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It wasn't even available officially on VHS yet. And I saw it. Now, this wasn't some crappy bootleg either. It wasn't like somebody filming the screen in the theater. No, somebody somewhere had got a hold of the frickin' film and telecinied it. This was like quality work. But I'll always remember that. I was asking my dad, well, what's with the black bars on the screen? I was like 10 years old. And he explained it to me. And said, well, that's actually the full image that you see in the theater. So I didn't quite understand what he meant, so I thought that I was watching somebody had filmed the screen, so I kept expecting to see people walking in front of the screen, and I kept watching for that, but of course it never happened. But I was sure it was going to. And I thought, well, how come I can't hear the audience? Yeah, things only little kids would think. And surprisingly, large numbers of adults do, too. But, yeah, so anyway, widescreen, Laserdisc, thank you very much. But like Laserdisc really made it a standard. Like it was hard, you would be hard pressed to find, especially a later generation Laserdisc, like from the 90s up until when they stopped making them in 2000, that wasn't widescreen. The other thing was digital sound. While the best you could get on VHS was hi-fi stereo or Dolby surround sound, you could get digital sound on Laserdisc with Dolby surround sound. Or I'm talking Dolby Pro Logic, the original Dolby surround sound, okay? So basically CD quality audio for your movies, which at the time was a big deal. And then in 1993, I believe, 1993, I got as a gift actually the Laserdisc for True Lies, James Cameron movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Tom Arnold. Not bad, although the ending was a little drawn out. I remember this distinctly. When I got True Lies, there was a piece of paper in it explaining something about the audio. Because, okay, Laserdisc had 4 audio tracks. 4 audio tracks. Okay? I'll get into that in a moment. So you had 2 left and right channels for digital, and then you also had 2 left and right analog channels. Okay? How exactly this was encoded analog on a digital disc, I don't know. Don't ask me, I couldn't tell you. The video was actually analog as well, even though it's on a big-ass, looks like a 12-inch size CD. But anyway, so there was a note in there explaining what this new audio was. So on the left and right digital stereo tracks, you had normal Dolby Pro Logic. Encoded onto the left analog track was a special new type of audio called Dolby AC3 Digital. And this pamphlet, this like slip of paper explained what Dolby AC3 Digital was. And now up until that point, all we had was Dolby Pro Logic for surround sound, which is basically stereo in the front and then a single surround channel. You'd have 2 speakers in the rear, but there was no separation between them. So it was effectively a mono channel in the rear. So you'd have the majority of your sound in the front, but then you'd have surround effects in the rear, and then you'd have your subwoofer. So really it's 4.1 channels instead of 5.1, right? So the big deal about Dolby AC3 Digital was, as it explained on this piece of paper, was that it gave you a full 360 degrees of separation. So there was full separation in the fronts, full separation in the rears, full separation every which way but loose. So that was really exciting to me. I was like, wow, this is like true theater surround sound in your home. Oh my god. So there you go, True Lies. The first one that I'm aware of that ever used it. And was it on DVD? Well, eventually, yeah. But it premiered on Laserdisc. So now Dolby AC3 Digital is, of course, known as Dolby Digital. I remember when I first heard about it, I was really excited and I wanted to get a demonstration of it. Because obviously, you know, I didn't have it yet, but I had a Laserdisc that had it. And I thought, well, there's got to be more Laserdiscs that are going to have this because this is revolutionary. And little did I know it would catch on as much as it did. Now, every single DVD out there uses Dolby Digital. But at the time, it was brand new. It was 1993, okay? So I go rushing downtown. This is in Toronto at the time. Rushing to downtown Toronto to the biggest, most highly respected electronics store in the entire city. Now, Toronto's a big city. So I went to the one that won all the awards, and I knew if anybody had it, they would. So I went in and said, yeah, do you have like a Dolby AC3 Digital receiver? Could I get a demonstration maybe? Blah, 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 blah. I was all excited, like all shaking and stuff. And the guy didn't know what the hell I was talking about. The guy at the store, the big respected electronics store, didn't know what I was talking about. There was one guy in the store who knew what I was talking about. Thank God I managed to find him. And then I think the first guy I talked to directed me to him. So I talked to him and he said, yeah, it sounds great, except we don't have anything. We don't have any receivers. We don't have anything set up, no demonstrations, nothing. So it was so new, the technology wasn't even available yet. So the encoding was on the disc, but I couldn't actually get a demonstration. So that was, you know, eventually, obviously, I heard Dolby Digital, and it just amazed me. And a lot of people will say that DTS Digital Surround, which also started on Laserdisc, thank you very much, is even better. The main reason being that DTS surround sound uses higher bandwidth. It doesn't compress the audio as much. So they would have some Laserdiscs encoded with DTS surround sound, and that's all the audio there was. You couldn't get any other audio on there because there was just no room. It would use both of the analog channels for the DTS surround, or actually no, I think it actually used both the digital channels because there was higher bandwidth available on there. And yeah, so anyway, that was that. What else was it? Director's cuts. Director's cuts were very common on Laserdisc. You would get extended editions of movies that you could not get on VHS. First one I ever saw was Aliens, James Cameron's Aliens, where they released the what the hell is it? It's like 20 minutes of extra footage or something in the extended cut. You can get it on DVD in multiple editions now. And I highly recommend it. If you're at all a fan of Aliens, get the extended edition. It is far and away better than the theatrical version, I think. In fact, it's the only one I watch now. Same goes for Terminator 2, which I also had on Laserdisc originally, and it wasn't available. Actually, no, I think that one was available on VHS. But Terminator 2, Judgment Day, extended edition, the only version worth watching. But anyway, those kinds of things were commonplace on Laserdisc, and that's something that we see all the time now on DVD. Extras. Deleted scenes, bloopers, outtakes, behind-the-scenes featurettes. Thank you, Laserdisc. Yes, you would get like a big-ass boxed set of something. Now, okay, Laserdisc had two formats. There was CAV, which stood for constant angular velocity, and CLV, which stood for constant linear velocity. The main difference between them was CAV, you could fit half an hour per side of a disc. Yes, they were double-sided. CLV, you could fit an hour per side of the disc. The big difference between them is like, well, why would you use the shorter one and not the longer one? The main reason being was the limitations of the players themselves. Now, you're probably all going to laugh at this because it's so commonplace on DVD now. But if you wanted things like still frame, where you could just pause it and see the frame frozen, or if you wanted to do slow motion, or fast speed, or whatever, special effects as they called them, you could only do that on CAV discs. CLV discs were strictly playback only. It's kind of like what I was talking about before with the difference between Profile 1 and Profile 2 for Blu-ray. Well, maybe not exactly the same thing, but a similar principle applies. One has more features than the other, basically. So often you would get like super-duper special editions of movies on CAV discs, which means if it's a 2-hour movie, it's on 4 sides. It's spread across 2 discs. That was the biggest complaint people had about Laserdisc, was that you could fit so little on them, so that even a regular movie, you would have to flip the disc halfway through the movie. And but they had some players, the more advanced ones, which would automatically play the other side. They had like sort of dual flippable heads or something, I don't know. But anyway, those were expensive and not very many people had them. Most people would just do the disc flipping. So that was one of the big pluses when DVD came out, was that you didn't have to flip the disc anymore. Oh my god. What? All on one side? That's impossible! So, yeah, extras. The other thing was getting into, the multiple audio tracks, which you can probably guess what I'm going to say. Running commentaries, which we have everywhere now. Some are definitely better than others. That started on Laserdisc. So, let's recap, shall we? Digital sound. Widescreen. Dolby Digital audio. Dolby Digital surround sound, DTS surround sound, running commentaries, extras, director's cuts, and whatever else I mentioned. Well, that's at least 7 things. 7 big, significant things that are now commonplace on DVD, thanks to Laserdisc. The reason DVD took over from Laserdisc more than anything else was convenience and price. Laserdiscs, while cool, and there is something to be said, when you get one of those big boxed sets with like 9 discs in it, it's got some heft to it, man. You really feel like you've got something, okay? You gotta love the heft. Like I have an edition of the Terminator 2 Extended Edition. It's 3 discs, but it comes in like a big, massive leather case. Maybe one of these days I'll do a little thing about my Laserdisc collection. I actually don't have a lot of them anymore. I sold a lot of them off and have since replaced them with smaller, easier to transport DVD editions. But I still do keep some of the cooler sets around just because the sets themselves were so cool, like the Terminator 2 one. And I got a Platoon one that's like a big book. And it has the full script in it, which is pretty cool. Actually, I think it's an abridged version of the script, but pretty cool anyway. But yeah, so those big sets, while cool, were very expensive. I mean, for just a straight movie edition of something, you'd be paying about 30 or 40 bucks, if you're lucky. More like 60 most of the time. For just a single disc with the movie on it, no extras. If you wanted extras, you want to get one of the big deluxe sets, you'd be looking at $150, $200, sometimes $300 for for like a 3-disc set of something. Can you imagine? People paid it. I paid it. Happily. Because Laserdisc was the best thing going for a long time. So all I can say is, show some respect. It's a piece of history. And we owe a lot to Laserdisc. A lot of the stuff that we enjoy now came from Laserdisc. And I think I've made my point. So I hope y'all learned something from this one. Show some respect for your elders, damn it. Yeah. So that's it from me for now. So thanks for watching. And until next time, sayonara. By the way, since I'm not going to be calling this the HD Rants anymore, I don't know what I'm going to call it. So if you guys have any suggestions for what you think this series of home video and gaming and DVDs and history of the world of video stuff should be called, and compress all that down into some single coherent, all-encompassing title, let me know. I'd offer a prize, except I'm poor. But you will have my undying respect and admiration. And I'll mention you in a video. So anyway, if you got any ideas, let me know. Thanks.